Space Jam: A New Legacy was a fun nostalgia ride, but ultimately it's going to be forgettable. It was very bad acting by LeBron James and the people that were playing his family. The best part about this movie, or one of the best parts as far as acting wise, was Don Cheadle. His comedy, his delivery, he is just a gem in delivering his lines and a true master at his craft. I know he's done a lot of action, but I've said it before in many of my reviews where he's in movies, is that I believe he should be exploring his comedic side, and I was glad that this movie let him showcase a little bit of that. He was, by far probably the most, besides the tunes, he was the most enjoyable part of it, and he played the villain very well. Even though you ended up kind of liking him as a villain, which I don't think it was the movie's intention. They really wanted to make him evil, but Don is such a lovable person, and even though he's trying to portray that villain, the comedy, his character was so heavily ridden with comedy and punchlines that, I mean, you just can't end up liking the dude. But yeah, it was just really, really subpar in the acting. There really wasn't any story to this. I mean, it was just the LeBron. We get a little montage about the true LeBron, how he grew up, and there's like a little in the opening credits is basically like a homage to LeBron and how amazing he is and how he became the arguably or debatable whether he is the best player of this generation. That's up for debate, but we're not gonna have that here. But you basically have a montage, and his older kid is following in his footsteps, and he wants his younger kid to follow in his footsteps. But he wants to go. His younger kid wants to follow in gaming and develop the game. So he's kind of like a genius, basically. And basically, LeBron gets a deal or a proposal for a deal at Warner Brothers. So he goes in there, and while he's in there, his son and LeBron have an argument. And so like Don's character is like Ali G something. I can't remember his. Not Ali G. I think it was a character, but it's something algorithm. The name, Don Cheadle's character's name is escaping me right now. I think it's like Algae Rhythm or something like that, maybe. But anyways, he's a computer programmer. He lives in the computer, and he lives in the computer. And LeBron James, and his son have a problem, and basically, his son gets sucked in. His son and LeBron get sucked into the program, and basically, Don Cheadle tells LeBron, "Hey, we gotta face a one-on-one for you to rescue your son." And Don ends up pinning LeBron James against his own son, and that's how he markets it, and there's like a whole thing with it. And then LeBron's tasked, he gets turned into a tune, and now he has to find his basketball team, and he ends up having the tunes, right? Like we saw in Space Jam 1. And that's basically the premise. I mean, I probably poorly executed on my part in describing the premise, but there really isn't one. And it's very weak in its establishing of one. And this movie is solely for nostalgia and entertainment purposes. So I already knew that this was going to just be a cluster F of nostalgia and Easter eggs. So when I went in there, I went in it just as an enjoyment, as a spectacle, as just to see what I could see in this movie. There is so many characters. This is basically Warner Brothers, vomiting up every IP they own and putting it into the screen. And even if you want to pay attention to the story, you can't. Because even when you're trying to pay attention to the basketball game, you can't, because if it's not Batman, Pennywise, the Animaniacs, Big Giant, King Kong, there's just so many characters. Not just that's the drop in the bucket as for how many characters there is, and it's just a vomit of Warner Brothers IP, and it's just too much. But when you go into it, like I said, just in I'm gonna turn off my head and just enjoy visually the spectacle that's in front of me, it becomes a really enjoyable movie because you're like, oh, here, look at this. Oh, that's awesome. This is awesome. This is awesome. Even though there is a one part, and I'll just say this, I don't want to spoil this part, but it's in halftime where they have a reveal of a character or what we think is a character, and that probably I laughed out loud for a while. I would say for a good, three Mississippis as far as how they played that, and I thought that was brilliant. And I mean, jokes hit. Don't get me wrong from the beginning. Some jokes miss, of course. Nothing's perfect, but jokes hit when they're being done. It's just that there's so much of it. The volume of jokes is just too much that you can't follow along. It drags in a little bit in the beginning, but then it's just 1,000 miles per hour, and you have to keep up. And if you laugh and you can't hear the movie, if you're watching it at home, if you're in the theater, you probably won't have that problem. But if you're watching it at home and it's like a blink and you miss it, you laugh too hard and you get lost in the story. That's just how quick the pacing was. The animation was dope. As far as when there were tunes, when they turned into 3D, I don't know, I didn't like them. Bugs look weird, Babs look weird. They all looked weird. Elmer Fudd looked the weirdest out of all of them. He didn't even look like Elmer Fudd. He just looked like a mini-me of like Dr. Evil from Austin Powers. Maybe that was the reason why they drew him that way. But yeah, so it just 1,000 miles per hour, and it's just a huge nostalgia trip, which is cool because I'm an 80s kid and 90s kid, and a lot of this stuff is like I remember, but that's how I kind of took it in. And I didn't even know this was a sequel, honestly. I thought this was like a remake of the original, but this is literally the sequel, which then leads to a whole mess of plot holes as far as like why all of a sudden they have to be retaught to play basketball, since most of these were the ones that played basketball 25 years ago. But we'll leave that for other channels and other conspiracy channels to bring that up or discuss that as far as like the plot holes that this movie makes. But I didn't know, but they referenced the first Space Jam movie like 4 times in this movie, and they beat that joke. They beat a lot of jokes to death. But that's just what Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes does. If you remember all the animation or the cartoons, this is just what the Looney Tunes do. They don't have a chill, if you will. And then the last part is in the beginning. LeBron James as a kid, his friend brings him a Game Boy, and that's how he gets introduced to Bugs, and he gets all wrapped up right before his basketball game. And then his coach gets all mad, off of one instance of a Game Boy, and then like that changes his life. But then LeBron throws the Game Boy away. Who does that? Who would throw a Game Boy into the trash? I was just like, what? I mean, it was early on in the beginning, but there's no way back in those days that you got a Game Boy and you're just like, yeah, I'm going to stick to basketball. I'm going to throw this away. Now, you might not use it as much. But you're definitely taking that home, and you're not going to just chuck it into the trash. But all in all, I enjoyed it, like I said earlier, for the nostalgia, just for the spectacle, the presentation of it, which was great. But everything else was just bad. So for me, this movie was a C. And that's being generous, only because of the animation of the tunes. I enjoyed the IP throw up, where I saw Game of Thrones, Matrix, Harry Potter, all the Looney Tunes. It was nice to see that, and just be in awe of how much was in this movie. And Don's performance as the main villain was a thing of beauty. But other than that, lack of story, pacing was too fast. They beat the humor to death, and it was badly placed in sometimes. I mean, again, it was enjoyable. The comedy did hit in certain points, but it was just overdone. They needed to stick a little bit more with the story to make it compelling, at least like the original. But anyways, those are just my thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Did you enjoy it? Where did you see it? Did you see it at home? Did you see it in theaters? And I would say if you do see it in theaters, watch it in 3D. This movie lends itself to be watched in 3D. Yeah, and I think I would have enjoyed it more probably going to the theater and watching it in 3D. But I didn't think this was worth my money to go and put my money down like that since it's free on HBO Max. Maybe if I was forced to go to the movie theater, maybe I would have made it like me and my kids. Like we went to go see Black Widow, and maybe I would have done it like that. But since this one was just like already out, I was like, you know what? We'll watch it at home. But again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And like always, that's a wrap.